Good evening, members. Prayers this evening will be said by the Reverend Tim Watts, Chaplain, 36th Engineer Regiment and the Queen's Gurkha Engineers. Before the prayers, can we remain standing in silence for 1 minute in memory of Mr. Richard Thick and Mr. Derek Butler, both former members of the Borough Council and past mayors who have recently sadly passed away.
Thank you. I know that there will be tributes later to both those servants of this council and this town. And we have minutes and times of silence to give thanksgiving and time for remembrance. And thank you. We start our prayers with thanks. Thank you from me for having me to come and do the prayers. It's a privilege to be asked to come and do this. Lord God, thank you for the service and leadership of each member of the council and the officers who support them in their work. Thank you that we can meet in freedom and peace to discuss, decide, debate. Lord, please give all the members of the council your grace as they make decisions that have an impact on the people of this community. Please give them energy and courage to stand for their beliefs and convictions. Lord, we ask for your guidance and wisdom as the council begins this meeting. Help the members engage in discussion, help them find solutions, help them find agreement. Will you be a light to guide everyone's path through the consideration of each item on the agenda? Lord, you're a God who creates and inspires. You've equipped every person here with unique gifts and talents. Please inspire each member of this meeting with new ideas and fresh perspectives to accomplish the business of tonight. And lastly, a blessing for tonight and for you all. May the Lord bless you, make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face toward you and give you his deep peace as you listen, discuss, consider, and vote on important matters that touch our neighbours and their lives in this town. Amen.
Thank you so much, Tim. Please be seated. These proceedings will be webcast and recorded by the council, but will anyone else be recording or filming them? I look to Mr. Malcolm Mackay and I see no evidence of him. Having said that, I ask so that people at the meeting are aware that this will be happening. I see Councillor Cleater's hand.
As Councillor Mackay is not here, I will go with protocol and at least one of us, me, will reserve the right.
Thank you. I have received apologies from Councillors Jeffrey, Reardon, J. Sams and T. Sams. I've also been informed of a late arrival by Councillor Forecast. Are there any other apologies for absence?
Councillor Coates.
Councillor Coates noted. Councillor Keaton.
Councillor Mackay.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Councillor Wilby.
Councillor Will. Thank you very much. Agenda item 3. Are there any applications for dispensations? No information has been passed to our monitoring officer. Agenda item 4. Are there any disclosures of interest by members? Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have an interest with the motion concerning fusion, but apparently I'm allowed to speak and then I have to leave the room. So that's what I'll be doing. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Chair of Boxley Parish Council, I have an outside significant interest in item 14. Again, as with Councillor opposite, in your indulgence, Mr. Mayor, may I please speak before I leave the room?
You will be approved to speak and will have to leave, of course. Right, I come to the next item, item 5. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? And I'm going to pre-mention this. I believe all of us have been lobbied either verbally or by email on the matter that was raised at in an item later from Thurnham Parish Council. I assume we have all been lobbied on that subject, so that is for the noting. Thank you. Are there any further issues of lobbying? Councillor Thompson.
I think you will have a long list, Mr. Mayor, of councillors who've been lobbied by various persons on item 17.
Thank you very much. That is noted. Item 6. Oh, Councillor Summerskill. Is that noted? Item 6. It is agreed that the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed. Is that agreed? Item 17. Are the minutes of the annual meeting of the Borough Council held on the 17th of May agreed as a correct record? Agreed. Thank you, members. Right. Item 8. Well, I'm going to start by going straight to our early remembrance for 1 minute. Not only as mayor, but I have been asked by my own group to represent that group to lead the tributes to both councillors Fick and Butler. They were in fact members of the Conservative group and my group, and I actually knew them both very personally. In an era where we are now, some many years ago since that, those names are written up on that board, I believe only 7 people were on the council in that time, 7, 8, maybe 9, that are currently in this room. Some of which, like Councillor English and Nagy and Gooch, There have also been mayors, and Councillor Perry, of course. But I think it's fair to say that whilst only a few of us will remember those two individuals, we both know how much they contributed to this council. Perhaps I should start with Richard Thick. Richard Thick was actually my co-member when I was first elected. He represented Headcorn and the parishes around Headcorn at the time. He actually was mayor in my first year. I can honestly say that Richard, commonly often known as Dick Thick, and sometimes those words we use the other way around, I can honestly say that he was one of these people that frequently put his foot in it. He was frequently non-tactful, he was frequently non-appropriate, he was frequently non-correct. In fact, at times he was an utter embarrassment. Now, it's not right, and I have discussed this with Faye Gooch earlier, we wanted to be honest, we wanted to be open, and we wanted to be realistic. It's always wonderful when somebody does pass away that you give enormous tributes, which are also a few comedic anecdotes, but you also say how wonderful they were. Well, I think at times Richard Thick was a bit awful at times. He was a bit of an embarrassment. He certainly embarrassed me. He was certainly a very difficult character, and yet we all found him very, very endearing. He was a lovable rogue in many respects. And I have to say that in terms of my community, in terms of Headcorn, he certainly did contribute a great deal to it. So he's what many people respect as a community politician and was very much involved in it. He used to cut the grass in the churchyard. He used to play a bit of cricket. He used to do a bit of shooting. He used to sing in the church choir. He was also a member of Sutton Valence Choir. Before all of that, he was an IT consultant, was actually advisor at Aldermaston Research Centre. He actually had a fair bit going for him. In his latter years, he actually managed and owned and ran, with his dear wife, a very good B&B guest house in the area that actually got 5 stars on a TripAdvisor rating. So he did do his bit, but when he did his bit, he tended to do it in a pub called the White Horse. In fact, if he wasn't in the White Horse, he was very often in the Hawkenbury Arms, and if not, in the George and Dragon. Or alternatively, you could find him in the pubs either side of the town hall. He was endearing. I'll leave it at that. He was difficult and yet charming, and I will miss him dearly. As for Derek, I have to say that Derek was a complete opposite to Richard Thick. Derek was the perfect gentleman. He was actually basically the master at arms in the courts for much of his life. He actually managed solicitors on both sides. He actually managed the criminals, the innocent, the guilty, you name it. And I understand the court speak very highly of him, as he was a permanent gentleman to everybody, regardless of what their reason for being in that court was. He carried that gentlemanly conduct throughout, not only in the courts, he also served on Rochester Bridge Trust, and as I said, Faye's going to talk about a few more other things. But on this council, we could actually describe him as almost non-political most of the time. He was a member of the Conservative group, but he was very much a people's champion in many respects. And he would often agree without anybody telling him what to say, but he would just make decisions of his own because he always had a very strong sense of welfare and a strong sense of citizenship. and for that he may have not always agreed with the Conservative whip. But having said that, he was always a gentleman. When I attended his funeral recently, a number of other things came to light. He was known as the teenager's father. He had one daughter, and in teenage years, not only would he take his daughter out, he would take 8 other teenagers every time. And every time, and this was some time ago admittedly, he gave each one of them a £1 coin every time they went, whether it was going to the cinema or whether it was going 10-pin bowling. All of those teenagers, now in their 40s, were at that funeral, and they all remembered him deeply and with many, many tears. But I could wax lyrical about the two gentlemen further. I'll leave it there because I'm sure others will want to say much the same or even more. So I now hand it over to Councillors Thompson first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, members. It is my sober privilege to be representing our group to acknowledge the contributions of Councillor Derek Burke and Councillor Richard Thick, both of whom gentlemen I did not know personally. As I've observed elsewhere, we do not get to choose the people that we work with. We don't get to choose the folk whose shoes we then discover ourselves walking in. Mr. Mayor, you've already pointed out that it was indeed a short number of years ago when a small number of people in this room sat next to the two esteemed gentlemen who we've mentioned. Padre might have read to us on a different occasion of a parable reflecting on two sorts of people in answer to the question, who is my neighbour? Some who walk past on the other side and those who muck in and give their everything. Real life, of course, is more complicated, and we're not here to make party comments, rather simply to point out that these two gentlemen, I know from the anecdotes that have been shared with me, gave of their best, both in humour, in arts, in their warmth as people and big personalities, and in their service to this town. We're grateful to them both, and I send our sincere condolences to their families. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor English.
I first came across the name Richard Thick some time before he was actually elected to the council. Richard was responsible for this council's only appearance in Private Eye, when they ran a picture, very large picture, of his election poster which said, "Vote Thick, vote Conservative." I think that says a lot. Having said that, I soon made Richard's acquaintance, and I have to say, the Mayor's characterisation is very accurate. But Richard was a passionate man who cared passionately about the villages he represented. And if occasionally his character was a little abrasive, it was because he cared so very, very much about what he was doing. And that spilled over occasionally inappropriately, but I would rather someone was passionate about what they were doing and cared very deeply than a totally calm person, always polite, who didn't actually care about the residents they were representing and the community they served. Whilst I was mayor, Richard was my deputy mayor, and I have to say that he was the model of supportive. I said to him jokingly at the start of the year, I'll do anything except Morris dancing. And he very nobly volunteered himself for every Morris dancing event that came up that year. So, sorry, Richard, for inflicting that on you. But I have to say that he was as supportive as you could possibly be. At every event, that I couldn't do, he was there picking up the loose ends. And I was very saddened to hear of his passing. He was a character, as has been said. He took part in many, many activities outside the council. I particularly remember being at one or two singing events where Richard was taking part, and also being at some events with Beauvais Twinning Association, where I won't translate some of the lyrics that were sung in the presence of the Beauvais Rugby Club. However, I would have to say that he was an interesting man, and I'd rather have spent an evening in his company than many, many other people I can think of. I will ask my colleague, Councillor Nagy, to make some remarks about Derek.
Lanagi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on Richard, when he was the mayor, full council meetings were very, very unpredictable. Very unpredictable. As for Derek, he was one of these nicest blokes you ever want to meet, and Mary, his wife, they was a great couple, fantastic couple. Mary's not very well either, so it's a bit sad, and I was a bit shocked by his passing because he was still going to meetings the week before, something like that. When he became mayor, he wanted to play me table tennis at the Howardy Warden because he thought I was good, but he wiped me right out, and we did have that game. But he was very good at table tennis, that's for sure. And he was one of those people you don't really notice until they've gone what they was doing. He was involved the Sea Cadets, which we've covered, street pastors, and we've got street pastors are also going to be doing school pastors, just sort of let you know that one, going into schools. And Rochester Bridge. I tried to get on Rochester Bridge at that time, but he was the man to be on Rochester Bridge, representing Maidstone. Always had the community at heart. He's just one of those people, it's nice to know you knew him when he was alive. It's just a bit of a shock that he's gone, really, but he will be missed by many people and many things that he supported, and God bless him.
Thank you, Councillor Nagy. I understand in the case of the Labour group, Councillor Dan Wilkinson wishes to speak on Richard Thing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know there are people here who knew Richard far better than I did, both politically and personally, so I'll keep my remarks brief. But it's a privilege to be able to say something about someone who served this borough with distinction and who, like all the Headcorn councillors that I've known, are well regarded and popular in the ward. Before I got involved in local politics myself, I already knew Richard to speak to, though he'd left the council before I joined it. But as I understand it, he was well known for his strong views on planning, especially when it came to unpopular applications. You never had to guess where he stood, and I'm told he made his feelings clear, often loudly. Aside from councillors Harper and Mackay, Richard was probably the only elected councillor I knew personally for quite a long time. So hearing a different point of view, especially delivered in Richard's famously blunt style once he found out that I was mixed up with Labour, was always memorable, and it made the news of his recent passing all the sadder. He cropped up in conversation several times just lately, so I knew he'd moved to be closer to his daughter. I hope no one minds a bit of levity on a sad occasion, but I'll always remember Richard sweeping into the White Horse like a Tory version of the Fonz, ordering a pint, throwing some well-aimed abuse at whoever he knew, including the landlord, draining his glass and disappearing again as quickly as he'd come. Although there was that one occasion he dropped in with the mayoress on his way to a function and spent most of the visit urging people to mind their language, presumably worried that Mrs. Thick might suspect this was a regular haunt, or worse, that he engaged in that kind of behaviour on a regular basis. He also refused to let anyone try on the mayoral chain, which was probably wise. Richard was unmistakable, and he'll be missed not just by those who agreed with him, but by all who respected his contribution to Maidstone's civic life, and on a personal level, he made me smile. So on behalf of the Labour group, our condolences to Richard's family and friends.
Thank you very much, Dan. I do appreciate how you were very much involved in the Headcorn community well before you were a councillor. Maureen, would you like?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't say that I knew Derek Butler, but he came across what I do know as a gentleman. And I think that sometimes is sadly lacking in politics, whether national or local. He was a senior warden at the Rochester Bridge Trust, and I think that's something I certainly know from their honouring him, of how much he is missed there. Being engaged with the Sea Cadets, the street pastors, this is a man who gave back to the community. And I think, again, and it's been touched on by Councillor English, someone who did genuinely care, someone who actually did the job and wasn't just in it for the title, for the kudos, if you like, although it's certainly becoming a tarnished crown these days, public service. So on behalf of the Labour Group, I would like to offer my sincere condolences to Derek's family, his friends, and the wider community who were touched by his kindness, generosity, and public service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to round off the tributes, Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start with dear Derek. I do call him dear Derek because he was a dear man. And Maureen, Councillor Claytor, I really thank you for your tribute because you were pretty spot on. And I just can't repeat that. You were very good, thank you. Dear Derek, he was so genuinely caring. He was very quietly unassuming, but he had an authority, but you didn't notice that he had an authority. When he was mayor with his wife Mary, they made such an impression on all the people that they met. They would remember their warmth and their kindness. He was a friend to so many people that you wouldn't know about. He volunteered, as you rightly say, with Maidstone Street Pastors. He was treasurer of the Rochester Bridge Trust for many years. They are sad to lose him. He was treasurer of Maidstone Sea Cadets, carefully advising them and steering them through the COVID crisis. I remember that well. He was a lovely chap, fondly remembered, and he really will. I know he will rest in peace. He was a deeply religious man, a loving man, and we will all remember him very, very fondly. So on behalf of the, is it the Fountain Oakwood Independent Group and the bloke down the road and the woman up there, we do give our really sincere condolences to his lovely daughter and family. Funny enough, Richard Thicke, yes, he was actually musically talented. He started singing in a church choir when he was 6, and he was selected for a scholarship to St. Paul's Cathedral, but his mum wouldn't let him go because she didn't think that he could stand being at a boarding school. So that didn't, but he did become a really good tenor, which was why he sang. Yeah, he was straight talking and called a spade a spade. But I actually said to him, you know you've been the rudest mayor we have ever had. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, but it was fun. So I hope he finds peace now that he is at rest. And we send his family deep condolences. Bit of a shock, but thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you all very much for those tributes. I'll just carry on with a few more mayoral announcements before we get on to the bulk of the agenda. I've spent the last, well, it feels like a long time actually that I've actually been doing it, and I've only been doing it since May the 17th. But in that time I've met presidents, not big presidents, presidents of smaller regions of Europe, princesses, mayors, bishops and senior members of the forces, senior members of commerce. But I tell you what, nothing gives me greater pleasure and wins my heart more than meeting the people in the borough. It goes from seeing things from Maidstone choral reunion or Maidstone singers singing in a church or in a community centre, to climbing Staplehurst Church Tower and seeing the entire view right up to the Greensand Ridge and across the Weald. Not all of the borough, but the vast majority of it. I can tell you, climbing the church tower at Staplehurst is pretty hard work too. When they built those towers, everybody was much smaller and they had much smaller feet, so the steps were much smaller. Going up was fine on the soles of my shoes. Coming down was virtually impossible. I had to come down sideways. And on the basis of the fact that I just climbed Dungeness Tower the week before, my thighs were pretty well suffering a great deal at that time, but the view was worth it. And meeting people, right down to a school I visited at Roseacre in Bearsted, where we opened a sensory room. So meeting parents and children there was wonderful. And only this weekend, we started the Maidstone Carnival, and the Deputy Mayor opened the Maidstone Arts Centre. Meeting people in those places was absolutely enjoyable. I could go on for more, but we've got a big agenda. But one thing I will close on is I have had 2 events, both very successful, both absolute sellouts, which were quite surprising. We had to draw the bar at 70 and 80 in numbers on both events. And I'm so pleased to see so many of you at those events. I'm sure most people really enjoyed the lunch at Headcorn Aerodrome, and certainly I know that most people enjoyed the garden party at Allington Castle. In fact, that was so popular we had to close the numbers. When we got to 80, we really had to call it a day. So I thank you all, particularly for those that did attend that, and especially the reports that have come back saying that members present, and I include many of you that were there, thanking you so much for providing so much courtesy to so many visiting mayors and so many other members of the community. I know that everybody went away enjoying not only the setting, but the food and the company. So thanking you very much indeed to all of those that attended. And basically, I have to say, watch this space. Something more have to be planned. Anyway, we move now to agenda item number 9. I have received notification from Councillor Kehealy wishes to present a petition requesting a permanent memorial to the 6 local women wrongfully executed for witchcraft in 1652. Councillor Kehealy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as you'll know from your agenda packs, we're seeking to create a permanent memorial to these women. So I thought I'd tell you a bit about what happened and why we're looking for a memorial. Nearly 373 years ago, on the 27th of July, 1652, a witch hunt was taking place, exacerbated by political and cultural events of the times. 6 local women, Anne Ashby, Anne Martin, Anne Wilson, Mary Brown, Mary Read and Mildred Wright were all on trial for their lives, pretty much exactly where you are seated and I am standing today. Where we are now is the site of the lower court where these assizes were held. These women were amongst 18 people accused of witchcraft on that day. And these women, all spinsters or widows, were found guilty and sentenced to hang, a sentence that was carried out almost immediately on Gallows Hill at Pennenden Heath. Unlike the jury, the judge, Sir Peter Warburton, wasn't convinced, and 3 of these women were later to receive a judicial reprieve, which arrived a month too late. These women weren't witches performing spells to murder or maim someone. They were most likely healers or midwives who were trying to treat and help people who unfortunately died. And these were all single women who had no one to stand up for them. They had virtually no voice, and they were persecuted for being old, for being poor, for being a nuisance, or for not going to church. They were persecuted for being a burden or for being indifferent. And in short, they were persecuted because they were women. The other 12 defendants that day, those who weren't sentenced to hang, were all married women or men. Yes, this was 373 years ago, but the remembrance and vindication of these women is as relevant today as ever. As we continue to stand up to bigotry and discrimination and fight for equality and rights for all members of our society, as we embrace our heritage and our rich diversity here in Maidstone, we do so against a constantly evolving backdrop of fear and misinformation, of religious, political and cultural division, sadly not so very dissimilar after all to that of 1652. The witch hunt still exists in other forms. Commemorating these women, acknowledging previous wrongs and being accountable for past mistakes as we seek to redress social injustices will of course not bring them back or banish all of the issues we face today, but it will serve as a reminder that we have learnt lessons from Maidstone's past and that such a dark and violent history will not be allowed to repeat itself in any form here today. Thank you.
In accordance with the Council procedure rules, the Council will now debate the petition for up to 20 minutes, with the intention that the petition and the views of the Council will then be referred to the appropriate decision-making body. A factual briefing note on this issue has been circulated. For those that want more clarification, that decision-making body will be the Cabinet. The debate will be subject to the normal Council debating rules, except that at the end of debate, no vote on the petition will be taken. But the petitioner will have the opportunity to speak for a further 3 minutes, responding to the issues raised in the debate. I now open it up to the floor. Councillor Harwood first.
Thank you. I felt it was appropriate to speak because I am a ward councillor for Kempston Heath, and to give some reassurance that locally the killing of those women accused of witchcraft back in 1652 has been marked both in the History Garden close to the Heath, where I used some of my devolved budget many years ago, decades ago, to mark that. And latterly, there is a installation that's going into that History Garden, which does reference, amongst other things, the witchcraft trials. So there is some local recollection, but I think it's important that we, as a borough and for the whole of Maidstone, mark this really significant history. And I think it's worth saying, because Councillor Keeley properly talked about it being the most vulnerable and powerless in society who were scapegoated and fell foul to this terrible cruelty, that this was not just about the evil years of the Commonwealth in 1652 when Puritan fundamentalism was sweeping the country. It wasn't just at that period. Sadly, Maidstone has some far more recent brutal references when it comes to cruelty to women. And when we're talking about judicial murders, much closer to home, in County Road, again in my ward, the last woman to be publicly hanged in Britain was outside the gates of Maidstone Prison. And that was not during the Commonwealth. That was not in the 17th century. That was in 1868. In 1868, photography was widely used. And the young woman who was hanged then, Frances Kidder, she had learning disabilities. The accusation that she was meant to have killed her stepchild was never really borne out. There was never any real evidence to it. And yet, I mean, the most, I think, really obscene about that was, I talked about, photography was around then, that there was no moral outrage in that Victorian time about hanging a young woman with mental disabilities. The outrage was that people might have been able to see her legs. So therefore, they had to erect a black felt so that no one could look at the legs of this young woman being hanged. I think something that is even more disturbing, when we're here in the town hall, there was another young woman called Susanna Lott, and she was accused of petty treason, plotting to kill her husband, as it was called then. And that young woman, she was heavily pregnant, and she actually gave birth while she was awaiting trial. And she was tried in this building. This building was 6 years old when she was tried, 1769, again, not that long ago. And she was hanged and then burned at Penston Heath for petty treason. And her baby, that died as well, of course, had lost his mother, Betty is buried in All Saints Churchyard. So I think we really do need to reflect on this. And as a borough, I think we do need to mark these terrible cruelties and remind people, even now, that those vulnerable and powerless in society must never be the scapegoats again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. I didn't quite get everybody, but I have Councillor English, Wilkinson, Russell and Clark on my list. Is there anybody else? Sweetman and Trubinsky. Greenan? No. Councillor Miller, did you want to speak? No? Sorry, we're just checking up our notes here. Councillor Jenkins-Baldock wanted to speak. Yeah. Right. Okay, Councillor English.
Mr. Mayor, members, it may seem odd, perhaps, that we are marking an event so long ago, although it is not without precedent. If you go into Brenchley Gardens, you will see the war memorial that was not too long ago erected to the War of the Three Kingdoms and the people who fought on both sides from this borough. It is important that places like Maidstone remember our history, both good and bad. Those who do not remember history are often doomed to repeat it, whether as tragedy or as farce, it repeats. We need to mark our history, both good and bad. These awful crimes against humanity, against women, against the vulnerable, are not things that happen in isolation or things that have ceased to happen. They are things that unfortunately still continue to happen, and the response from those in authority to the cries of the vulnerable is often a shrug of indifference, particularly if those vulnerable people are poor, elderly, from an ethnic minority that's unpopular or another minority that is unpopular. That is at the base of what happened with those victims of abuse up and down the country in local authorities. They were poor, they were considered insignificant by those in authority. They were victim shamed and made out to be the problem rather than the oppressors who were oppressing them. So it's important to learn the lessons of history. From a cultural point of view, and being slightly more mercenary from a cultural point of view. A borough like Maidstone, which has an important and impressive, although often blood-stained history, needs to be aware of the importance from a cultural and artistic point of view and from a tourism point of view of flagging up and making available our history, even in its grimmest reality. Because people are interested, a lot of people are interested in seeing that history, whether it's the of events, good and bad. We had some mockery when the Nolan statue was put in outside the old hospital site, marking one of the blunders of British military history. But it has proven of great interest to people who visit this borough. So from a purely pragmatic point of view, it is also the right thing to do, to remember, celebrate, in the broad sense of the word celebrate, our history and the events both good and bad that have happened in and around Maidstone as part of our ongoing efforts to ensure the vitality and success of our community.
I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm going to have to call time on quite a bit of this debate already. We're running well over time already with 7 speakers to go. So it's 2 minutes each at the most. So, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Throughout Maidstone, there appears to be many amazing statues and memorials dotted around the town. However, there do not appear to be many representing the rich tapestry of women's history amongst them. So that's why I feel that it would be a fitting cause to remember this awful chapter of Maidstone's history and the terrible way these women lost their lives by supporting Councillor Kehealy's petition. I would also hope that this will be just the start of a creation of many more memorials to commemorate the many other fabulous female historical figures in Maidstone's past. The Maidstone suffragette movement would be another great chapter to remember. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Petition, noun, a formal written request, typically one signed by many people, appealing to authority in respect of a particular case. You are the authority. You lead the council. If you want to put a monument up to redress the wrongs of 1652, 1868, 1769, you can do it. Local history is really, really important, and it needs to be recorded, and as has been mentioned by my colleague, Councillor English, is of fantastic tourist interest. As things change in the present, quite rightly, we look to the past for guidance and reference. But you don't need to petition yourselves to do it. You can carry on and do that. My only caution would be, as our residents are struggling financially in using food banks, as we spend the taxpayers' money on one or more of these statues or memorials, I caution that we just do it wisely. Thank you.
Councillor Clark, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chairman. I do welcome this petition. I think that sometimes we celebrate the great and the good of the area, and sometimes we find history in the cracks. We see on Facebook somebody post a photograph, or they post a little anecdote, or you see something on the side of a building that's been plastered over many times, and I think that sometimes we might think that's a dark part of Maidstone. Perhaps that's a reason why it wasn't commemorated in a statue. But I think actually it's a little bit more sinister than that. I think at the time it was seen as a very bad thing, not what was happening, but what had happened to cause the executions. And I think we need to sort of look at the way these things happened in the past and look at how we feel when we look out at things that are going on today and the oppression that is in all corners, and we do need to shine a light on that. I did quite recently, I have a friend, Nick Vincent Abnett. She's the wife of an artist in Maidstone called Dan Abnett, and she had an exhibition in the Nucleus in Chatham, and it was 144 pots for 144 women, and she's a ceramicist. And she created this room full of absolutely beautiful pots. Everyone was different. Some were small, some were large, some were glazed, different colours. But as you opened up the door, you saw this absolutely wonderful sight of 144 pots. But when you went around and you lifted the lids and you took out the piece of paper, it told you the story of that person. That was one of 144 women that had suffered femicide. And she carefully got miniatured versions from newspaper clippings. It was an enormous labour of love to do this. Not only did she do that, she also put something in the pots for comfort. She made these little sort of wall figures and put little sort of tokens in there, just as a little bit of comfort for the people that were affected. The one thing I will say is when you open that door, what a spectacular sight. But the second thought you have is every one of those pots is somebody that was killed. Now, I actually I was talking about, in the opening of the Art Community Centre, I was actually talking about perhaps bringing that to Maidstone. But I really do think that we have to look at what's happened in Maidstone. As I say, there's a lot of dark parts of Maidstone. There's lots of evidence that things have happened. But I think that this is a good way of teaching people what was bad and how we can learn from that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We are running out of time. I'm terribly sorry, Councillor Harper, but I don't think we're going to get enough time for you. Councillor Trubinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at the petition, I doubt now that these ladies are currently being vilified and treated with scorn by anyone. Rather, they're probably considered, if at all, with sorrow. I would question how the memorial will be funded, but also, what about an alternative? I believe there is some reference to these ladies in the museum at the moment, but to put a better and bigger display in the museum, detailing their stories, and with a suitable closing paragraph in memoriam, might be better. It would educate everyone rather than just having a memorial there. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Jenkins-Bullock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Keeley for, as author of this petition. This dark and tragic chapter in our town's history deserves public acknowledgement. The persecution and execution of these individuals were rooted in fear, superstition and misogyny, and represent a grave historical injustice. A memorial would serve not only as a tribute to those who lost their lives, but also as an educational and cultural reminder of the dangers of scapegoating, gender-based violence, and the misuse of power. Maidstone should take the opportunity to honour forgotten victims and educate future generations, and a carefully considered memorial would enrich the cultural life of our borough and demonstrate a commitment to truth, empathy, and historical reflection. It is important that we support the creation of a memorial that acknowledges this painful part of our heritage, and to help ensure that the injustices that these women suffered are not forgotten. Thank you.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a lot of sympathy with what has been said. Just a small word of warning, a little bit. When I was at university and I studied history as part of my course, my tutor, the first thing he said to me, never judge historical actions by your own situation you find yourself and society finds yourself in today. Witchcraft was an evil thing, we know that, but it was something that society at the time, in the mid-17th century, thought was something that should be persecuted. That's what the view was of the majority of people. I'm not saying it's right, I think it was terribly wrong, but it was something that we do have to recognise. So where do you stop with this? And what my worry is that these 6 witches were women, they weren't witches, is a terrible thing to say. But there are other historical actions that we could bring up. You know, there are dozens of things that we could look back in history and say the society at the time didn't act in the way we would act today. And are we going to rewrite history on that basis? I don't think we can. So that's what does slightly worry me. However, there is a big but in this one. And first of all, in my own ward, I have what we call a martyr's memorial. So there is a precedent for this. And 6 Protestant martyrs were burnt at the stake in the 16th century. And so there is a precedent for this. And I do think the actual issues that are raised in this do have relevance to our society today, particularly the treatment of women and the recognition of women in our society. So I do understand that, and I do agree with it in principle. My one worry is obviously we are spending, if we do it, we are spending public money, and at this time, the timing may not be very, very appropriate, dare I say, but I do agree with it, and I do have a lot of sympathy with it in principle. I'm just nervous about spending the public money at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Perry. Paul Harper, you now have an opportunity.
I think this is a really good idea. I think we need to perhaps widen it and think of a memorial or statue which could encompass everybody in terms of miscarriages of justice. I mean, as the county town, we would have had the Assizes Court for the whole of Kent, and as people have referred. There's been a lot of people. Okay, there's been a lot of people through our county town who deserve to be referred to, and I think we should perhaps think of a bigger memorial which can include reference to these ladies, plus some of the other people referred to, including some of the people like John Perry mentioned who are executed for religious reasons and other reasons of political force and so on. And I think if we could do that, we could do a good justice to as many people as we can do in one memorial, centrally somewhere in the town, and therefore hopefully encourage or educate people about miscarriages of justice in the past and get them to reflect, because these things still happen now. They happen across our country on various reasons on almost probably a daily basis. So miscarriages of justice and something we do need to give serious thought to, and how we can use a memorial to help people think and to educate the wider community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Councillor Sweeten.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought I was going to get overlooked there. I'm totally in support of Councillor Keeley's petition. This witchcraft trial remains a significant event in history, especially for the women of Maidstone, serving as a reminder to the danger of superstition and the consequences resulting from societal fear. Thank you.
Thank you. Was Councillor Green who wanted to make a speech? No. Right, that more or less concludes it with 2.5 minutes to go. So, Councillor Keeley, do you want to return, make further comments raised about in the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, thank you everybody for your support, your comments and even your criticism, because it highlights things that perhaps weren't said in here because it was only a short length of time. So the reason we chose to do a petition was because it's specifically about the women who were killed because of they were accused of witchcraft, as opposed to a greater thing that might be part of a greater thing. This is a specific issue that we wanted to raise. We were looking at something along the lines of a laid flat stone like they already have in Faversham in the marketplace there, something that people can walk past and see. It's not a huge great monument like the Queen's Monument. I don't think any budget in Kent or the UK has got a budget for that. And there is an interest in Maidstone. There is a big interest. So I have been talking to Maidstone Museum, and I know they were updating their exhibit about the witches, and they asked me to do a talk in September on the witchcraft trials of Maidstone, which is completely booked out, and they emailed me yesterday to ask me if I could arrange another date with them, which I have. And also a school have been in touch about me talking about the witchcraft trials to A-level history students because it's now part of their syllabus. So it's something that is current, it is something that people will have an interest in, and it doesn't have to be expensive, it doesn't have to be huge, it just needs to be a reminder that this specific issue is something that we want to raise, and I would happily support other monuments, statues, plaques, that sort of thing. For example, talking about the Marian Martyrs down at Fairmeadow outside Drake, that was 1557, Edmund and Catherine Allen. That's why Allen House is called Allen House. They have a plaque, it's a small round plaque. That sort of thing, it doesn't have to be huge. I'm not asking for it to be a humongous, great monument that everybody has to come and pay homage at, just so that it is remembered and these women are remembered and they are not wiped from our annals of history by the prejudice that they received.
Thank you. The petition and the views of council will now be referred to the Cabinet. I move to agenda item 10. I have received notification that Mr. Sean Turner wishes to ask a question of the Deputy Leader of the Council in the absence of Leader of Council.
Good evening. Given that Maidstone Borough Council is undertaking a community governance review, CGR, and in light of the wider local government reorganisation, LGR, process currently being explored across Kent, it is apparent that the assumed model of local democratic representation is being fundamentally altered. Whereas previously borough ward members represented communities locally, the move towards a unitary structure would likely reduce representation to fewer councillors serving larger populations, substantially diminishing direct accountability, whilst evaluating any constitutional or legal risks of undertaking such governance changes without full council authority. Question: under what statutory basis may the Executive or Cabinet initiate or progress a strategic reorganisation process, including engagement with central government on unitary transition without a resolution, recorded approval of council, full council, or a vote of the wider elected membership?
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Councillor English.
First of all, community governance reviews have existed for quite a long time. So the community governance review is not a fundamental change in local government architecture. Secondly, the Maidstone Borough Council did not initiate this review process. It was initiated by Her Majesty's Government and we are responding, along with other local authorities, to that initiative from Her Majesty's Government. The legal framework clearly sets out that in councils such as our own, which has a cabinet executive model, with the exception of those areas that are explicitly reserved for full council, such as setting a budget, or our regulatory functions such as planning or licensing, the executive, as to say the cabinet, has the authority to carry out and to respond to government consultations and to do many other things, but it's explicitly allowed. We are allowed to do that. Our own constitution specifically makes clear that the responsibility for responding to government consultations, including this one, is a cabinet responsibility. However, when we get to the point, both on the community governance review, and which will probably come first, and on the local government reorganisation, where specific proposals have to be put forward, then a full council resolution will indeed be required to make clear what alternative option this council wishes to pursue. Now, be clear, our option, what we wish to pursue, may well not be what the government decides to do, but the members of this council will, in accordance with our governance arrangements and the law, have a very full discussion on this, and any proposal put forward will be put forward with the democratic support of the majority of the members of this council.
Thank you, Councillor English. Mr Turner, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Deputy Leader of Council arising from or out of the original question or the reply?
I do. Okay. Has this council, in accordance with statutory obligations, the Constitution and the Nolan Principles, allocated any budget, expended officer time, or formally engaged with the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, Kent County Council, or external consultants regarding reorganisation proposals or options for unitary status prior to any full council ratification?
I'm almost minded to say that's a completely different question. However, as I wasn't informed that you were going to be asking for financial details in advance, I will have to say that you will receive a written answer, because I do not wish to mislead you in any way by giving you an answer off the top of my head.
Okay,
Thank you, Councillor English. In view of this question, I will ask officers to consult with Councillor English and give you a written reply.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask if, because there was one bit of the question that he raised about we went through local government.
Is this a point of order? Because I have answered the question.
Okay.
It's done and it will be dealt with. I have received notification that Thurnham Parish Council wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of Democracy and General Purposes Committee. As the Parish Council cannot be represented at the meeting this evening, I have agreed to ask the question on its behalf, and thus a written reply will go to them. Given that Thurnham West is a distinct community with its own identity and governance history, will the Council commit to ensuring that consultation processes from residents of Thurnham West are analysed, reported and presented separately from those of Grove Green to ensure that the voices of Thurnham West residents are not overshadowed by the larger Grove Green electorate, and that the final analysis fairly reflects the views of both communities?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is a pleasure to receive such a well-organised, well-written and coherently put together question, and it's also a pleasure to be able to assure Thurnham Parish Council that we will indeed meet fully their terms of their request and ensure that the information received and the feedback received from Thurnham West residents is collated and counted separately from the wider Thurnham area in order to ensure that we get a correct measurement, shall we say, of opinion across the board.
Thank you, Councillor English. Agenda item number 11. I've received notification from Councillor Dan Wilkinson wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Environmental Services and Enforcement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given the recent delay in informing Parkwood residents in upper floor flats that waste would no longer be collected from their bin cupboards, a change that was only formally communicated through a text from Golding Homes a week after it took effect, what steps will the Cabinet Member take to improve communication between Suez, the Council, other relevant agencies and most importantly residents, so that they can at least try to plan accordingly and avoid the health risks of uncollected waste, which are exacerbated by particularly hot summer months?
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilkinson. It's a very good question. Unfortunately, what happened in Parkwood was the result of an unforeseen accident which took place and affected the operative. So emergency action was taken And as is often the case with emergency action, the opportunity to inform residents was somewhat limited. Having said that, it would appear that the coordination between Golding Homes and Maidstone Borough Council was not of the best. We will be working with Golding Homes to try and make sure that this does not happen in future, and to put in place secure storage arrangements for the future to make sure that the risk of contamination or public nuisance is severely minimised. I can only apologise to the residents of Park Wood for this situation, and you have my personal assurance that we will be leaving no stone unturned. I know it's a cliche, but I mean it, to ensure with Golding Homes that this does not happen. And we will also be looking, of course, at our relationships with other social housing providers, registered landlords, and communal blocks to make sure that we're on the same page with those operators as well.
Councillor Wilkinson, do you wish to have a supplementary question?
Actually, thank you for that commitment, Councillor English. You've actually answered my supplementary question in your answer, very thorough. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. I've received notification from Councillor Dawes, wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Environmental Services and Enforcement.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. So I read just last week in the Housing and Cohesion Policy Advisory Committee meeting that these local councils want to engage with the community to trying to create trust between us and our residents. Well, I'm afraid last year bin contractors' failures in the rural villages have rather undermined the trust that our residents have within the local councils. And although it's great that you want to spend money in trying to build trust, I can't quite see how you would build trust on rubbles of bin collection fiasco. So my question is, when is some answers will be given to the rural community for what happened last year? You promised us some things in February and we're still waiting. It's been a year on. We just
Sorry,
need
Councillor Dawes, this is not the question that's been submitted to Council.
I think I know what Councillor Dawes is getting at, although it isn't quite the wording that was submitted. All I would say is that prior to the taking on the new bin contract, the council thought that it had undertaken sufficient preparation work. It subsequently turned out that that was not entirely the case. A number of lessons have been learned, and meetings have taken place with Suez and between some of our senior officers, myself, the leader of the council and their management. A lot of effort has been put in to putting those initial mistakes right. Fundamentally, we know what happened and what the mistakes were, so there is no particular need to carry out a review. And I have to say that I'm personally not particularly keen to do so in the way that was done by some of our neighbouring councils, because what that turned into, which seems a bit of a motif this evening, was a witch hunt, where there was an all-councillors meeting, which basically hung the staff out to dry and blamed the members of staff. So we are not going down that path. However, as I say, a number of lessons have been learned, and I'm quite happy to sit down with any group of councillors or parishes and go through those in detail with you so that you understand where we are and where we're coming from. What I would not want to do is go down the everyone piling on top of approach that was done in some of our neighbouring councils. What I would also say is that we have an open day at the depot in the autumn. It has not always been well attended by members of this council. I would hope that anyone who wants to see the operational details, and I accept certain people were very much there in previous years, wants to see and understand the operational details and the lessons learned, please come and engage with the staff at that open day, which I think will be quite a useful forum for this sort of information that you want to get. I'm quite happy to facilitate the information. It's how we do it, and not having a structure that almost sets up a confrontational mood. I hope that helps.
Councillor Dawes, do you have a supplementary question arising out of your original question?
Well, thank you very much for your response. I understand, and I don't want any witchcraft at all, witch hunt in any mean. But I thank you that you invited me and other rural parish to actually have a meeting and being explained where the failing was. That would be most helpful. Hope we can get a timescale on when that might be. Thank you.
Thank you. I've received notification that Councillor Perry wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Planning Policy and Management.
First of all, please, Mr. Mayor, please forgive me. I've struggled to read, so I normally speak off the cuff, but as it's a question, I'm going to attempt to read it in detail. Back in July last year, a planning application was submitted for a 3G sports pitch at Jubilee Field in Staplehurst. We understand that all the obligations and requirements have been met, but we are still waiting for the report from officers. This is a major project for the Parish Council to undertake. A fixed grant covering approximately 75% of the originally estimated £1 million costs has been agreed with the Football Foundation, which again is a major achievement. Unfortunately, this continued delay has now increased the cost of this project by a further £100,000, which has put further pressure on the Parish Council's finances. Any further delay as such would bring into question the financial viability of this project, which would seem to run counter to the Borough Council's stated aim of supporting stronger and healthier communities. Given that a year has now passed, could you explain why there is still a continued delay in receiving the officer's report and recommendations for this project? And could you, as the Cabinet Member responsible, ensure that this matter is now urgently expedited? Thank you. And thank you, members.
Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Perry. Your question is slightly unusual in that it relates to a live planning application. Therefore, I need to be quite circumspect in the way that I describe my response. However, in this specific case, further information was required from the applicant to address consultee responses from KCC. And I think that's at the root of the delay. These related to transportation and to biodiversity net gain. They were so significant that they resulted in amendments to the scheme being required, which unavoidably extended the application period. However, I can reassure Councillor Perry that the current application trajectory indicates that determination under delegated powers should be made by the 15th of August. Hopefully that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harwood. Councillor Perry, do you wish to have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just a brief one. First of all, thank you, Councillor Harwood. That was a very comprehensive response. I apologise for raising a planning application, but thank you very much for that. Just a quick question I have. Can we have some assurance for in the future that when applications planning of this nature, which carry very serious financial implications, that the committee, that the council can give some priority, so that we don't have the situation where we are asking, where delays are occurring, which cause obviously additional costs to the project. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Perry. I think we all share your concerns around there are different kinds of applications, but I think all applicants will see their applicant as the important one because it may be for financial reasons, as in this case, and it may be for social and other reasons. However, I think the real challenge we have is that we are not necessarily masters and mistresses of our own destiny, in that statutory consultees have a key role, and some of these are larger organisations such as Health, the Kent County Council, National Highways and others, and sometimes we do chase, we do try and impress upon our colleagues the import of these applications, but the answers are not always forthcoming. But I take away the spirit of your statement, and I'm sure colleagues do as well, and we will see what we can do, but I don't think I can make any promises because I have no powers over our partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now move to agenda item 12, where in the absence of the leader, I call upon the deputy leader of the council to submit the report on current issues. Councillor English, you may speak for up to 5 minutes.
Well, I apologise for speaking again, members of the council. Mr. Mayor, you must be getting slightly bored with me talking this evening. There has been a lot happening. It has been a busy few weeks, to put it mildly. Every year it seems that we have a shorter and shorter period of summer respite and more activity, like the Mayor, who has also been very active. I think it's fair to say that a lot of time and consideration has been taken up in the council with considering the local government review. We are still not entirely any the wiser as to where the government is going with this. However, a lot of work has been done in cooperation with Kent County Council and the other district councils and Medway in terms of preparatory work, so that we will be hopefully ready to submit a bid in line with the government's timetable, assuming the government stick to the timetable, of course, which I have no great confidence, but we hopefully will be ready. On a note rather more in our own control, we have been moving forward with our emphasis on greening the borough. You may have seen, I hope you've seen, the press release this week that indicates we not only retained our 4 existing green flags in Masons Park, but added a 5th in Frenchley Gardens. Our ambition to improve the parks and open spaces in this borough, which I think is supported broadly across the council, I wouldn't want to say that it's exclusive to us, is moving on. We are looking at the installation of pocket parks in the town centre to follow up the greening initiatives we've already started, and we've started rolling out the process of food forests with our first project in Midgley Close, which has turned a dystopian, almost unusable play area into something that the local community can truly value. We'll be rolling out similar projects and increasing the number of muriaki hedges across the borough, which will increase our biodiversity, our wildlife, and the usability of spaces, because as our summers get hotter, we desperately need the shade of trees and hedges to actually ensure that our parks are in fact usable. And we'll be looking at some of our other existing parks with play areas to actually look at what we can do in that respect. Moving very slightly sideways, our climate and biodiversity plans are moving forward with the new strategy adopted. And talking about strategies, and in line with some of what we said this evening,
the arts and culture strategy is moving forward to agreement. It is, I think, impossible to overstress how important arts and culture are to the future of Maidstone in terms of its economy and its viability as a place to work, live and visit. History and art and culture are essential to replace and enhance what's left of our retail offer. Like many other places, Maidstone has had a reducing attraction as a retail centre, and it needs to replace that. And we have the opportunities so to do. We also need to look at our sporting and leisure activities. Now, in light of things that are going to be said elsewhere in other discussions tonight, I must stress that the Borough Council is committed to improving leisure and sporting opportunities and events as well. What we don't want to do is set them against each other so that sporting opportunities prevent events taking place and events prevent sporting opportunities taking place. There's a time and a place for everything, and everything has its time and place. So we are working very hard. Many of these things are not particularly controversial. Some of them will be. But as we saw last night, there is some controversy about certain issues. And I would say that Maidstone Borough Council is not interested in taking the route of not maintaining its assets, of failing to invest, and ending up with buildings like County Hall, which has become worth almost nothing, or less than nothing, because of the failure to invest in it, or ending up like the roads of Kent, which are in many cases impassable because the local authority is not invested. Where there are issues to invest in, to improve Maidstone's current situation or future, either as a local authority or as a borough, we will take them. We will look at opportunities to bring in money and to invest in our future.
You're rounding up now, Councillor English.
I have finished. Invest in our future, because that's what we need to do.
Thank you. I now call upon other group leaders and their representatives to respond, focusing primarily but not exclusively on the issues raised by the Deputy Leader. You may again speak for 5 minutes. Councillor Stephen Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May touch on, but not exclusively. I shall milk that for what it's worth. I'm grateful to the councillors Russell Trubinsky and our resident classicist, Councillor Perry, for raising pertinent and thought-provoking comments with regard to the petition that we heard earlier on the subject of rewriting history, of asking what it is that we know, how we know things, or as our young school children are learning in their classrooms today, and you may not grasp this at this point, what is now known as epistemic insight. Following the Lives in Our Landscape gallery launch at Maidstone Museum last year, I'm delighted to appoint members and the public listening to the opening of the new Oldham Gallery, picking up Maidstone's history from the Tudor era this coming Saturday. There is nowhere else to be. A different history of witchcraft will be told in the first case of exhibits in the new Oldham Gallery at our museum. One of the key partnerships of private and public monies, MBC funds, and the generous donation of the William and Edith Oldham Trust funds. That strategy, the museum strategy, is complemented, as Councillor English has already hinted, in the arts and culture strategy that came again to overview and scrutiny yesterday, our 25 to 2030 strategy, which embraces heritage, tourism, events, health, particularly mental health, and economic development in one all-encompassing holistic strategy, not least including the opening of our Creative Maidstone exhibition workshop and creative makerspaces in Gabriel's Hill last weekend. Most excellent to see members arriving to celebrate Maidstone's art and culture heritage, those in the past, and our living artists, including Kaz Holmes, who was able to join us on Saturday, and the much esteemed Graham Clark, whose works adorn this building. I could say further things, but these are some of the highlights that it's been my privilege to have more than a little to lead in, and I commend the programme to the Council. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. You've just told everybody what the Deputy Mayor and I will be doing for the next few weeks if we haven't already done it. Thank you. Councillor Russell, the leader of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for those words about everything you've been getting on with. Points of difference, that's what this is all about. I think that's the point. I think we in this authority, and I'm glad to say it, get on a lot better than in other authorities. But we have to have points of difference, and that's what this is all about. Otherwise, why you or us, why us or them? That's what we're all here for. So we've got a placeholder tonight, item 16, that we haven't got. It would not have been my group's choice to have refurbished Maidstone House at a cost of £7.7 million, which is almost double the asset value. We wanted to bring that to you tonight. We wanted every member of this council to have a vote and have a say on that. We tried to get as much of it off of Yellow Pages as we could. We made a written protest, so we had as much in part one as we possibly could, but we didn't ultimately get past overview and scrutiny, so it obviously is decided. We do think that 7.7 million spent on a circa £4 million asset, to our group that just doesn't make sense. There must have been a way to bring this in more cheaply, but ultimately this is a point of difference. This is a Green Independent Alliance and Lib Dem leadership choice. We're not the judges of your choices. Ultimately, the residents are. On that point about County Hall, it can't quite be worthless because they're moving some staff back in. So I've heard word on the street. Right, local government review, quite rightly, is a focus. It's taking a lot of time, and I welcome your comments on that. We've got talking at item 14 about the democracy and general purposes, and I just would caution, especially now having a view of other councils, they're getting on with stuff. Tunbridge and Morling are doing some new building. They've got plans for their Angel Centre and the car parks. Tunbridge Wells have got plans for Royal Victoria Place. We don't want to be left behind in this. We want to be cautious of what our partners or other like-minded councils are getting on with. We're really concerned about the loss of our 5-year land housing supply. My colleague's email outlined it more eloquently than I ever could. It's great that some sites are getting through with perhaps a lower density, perhaps a nicer build, but those numbers don't disappear. They have to go to other sites. Those numbers have to be found. I see your plans on the forward plan for a new local plan review of the review, because let's not forget it's a review. Is a year and a quarter as soon as possible? We're not sure. We understand that you didn't vote for the plan, you've said it enough, but we're now in the same situation as if it hadn't gone through. So I just urge you, let's expedite this, let's get on with it. What are you going to do about it? The 1,000 affordable houses was cross-party policy, whole council embraced. It wasn't a Lib Dem policy, it's been mentioned recently. This has gone quite quiet. This is sometimes a good thing, because you can have lots of things going on with that. But I'm sure our council would welcome, if you might agree to it, a full council update so that we could all just have a look at where we are with that programme, because it was so important and it was cross-party. And I know it might go to committee, but I think it'd be a welcome thing to bring here as it is one of our flagship policies. Arts and culture strategy was welcomed. We had it at overview and scrutiny last night, really warmly welcomed, really pleased to see it. And like you say, as shops and are fewer in the town centre, it might be a very good way of re-energising our town centre and repurposing it to some extent. We'd like to see a focus on rural sports and leisure. We'd like to see what you might be doing in that arena, and we welcome that you are committed to sport and leisure in our borough. We very much are. Thank you. I think I will probably leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Cleater.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we do need to invest in the town centre. If a woman is a certain size, I would love to be able to buy clothes in Maidstone, but I can't. I also think we need to ensure we have a mixed economy. I absolutely welcome the arts commitment. In terms of sport, the one thing I would plea is it needs to be accessible for all. Because if you're paying 30, 40 quid for a court, that's probably out of the reach of a lot of people with kids. I used to struggle when mine were little, taking them to the leisure centre because of the cost of taking the 3 of them, etc. So when we're looking at these sort of things, I'm pleased that we have free tennis at Clare Park, at Pennenden Heath. I welcome the actual remembrance of women who've suffered, and as someone who lives in Pennenden Heath, you know, as you say, we're not asking for a Queen Victoria, a nice little plaque that just when people walk past can go, hey, did that really happen here? So I welcome that. In terms of another place, for all we disagree here, anyone who sat and watched the KCC, I was in that chamber, it was awful. It was absolutely awful. And this is a reminder to us that we've already passed a motion on violence against women and girls. And my plea is we need to get on with that citizens' assembly. We need to get on with dealing with that. Because the police didn't put a warning out that the England women were playing. So, you know, be careful, men. There's going to be violence if you've had... No, they haven't done that for this tournament. So we know what the problem is. And with all due respect to the men in this chamber, it's violence against women and girls, predominantly by men. And the sooner we all accept that and get on with doing the job and making it better, then the better Maidstone will be. Because I can assure you, if England men were playing, we'd have had reminders from the police and we'd have extra patrols out now. But I haven't seen one, and the women are playing tomorrow. And no, I'm not giving me apologies for planning. I'll just have to get my son to text me the score. So, for me, we will always have fundamental differences. That's fine, that's politics. But I like to think in this chamber, we are respectful of each other's views. We can be robust, you know, and as someone said to me once in a union meeting, my God, you've got a gob on you like the Mersey Tunnel. Yes, I have, and I will use it. However, it's when you're passionate about things. Because if you're not passionate, why are you here? Because we're all here because we care. The other thing I wanted to briefly touch on, and I would urge you all to email, there is a change coming in policing in Maidstone. It's called the most appropriate person. It's a policy. We need to find out how that affects our area. I can tell you how it's going to affect our areas. It means our neighbourhood policing are going to get pulled off into other duties. Now, there's money being given for neighbourhood policing. And for areas like ours in Shetway, Parkwood, Mangravid, Seneca, and out in the rural areas, it's starting to make a difference having those police officers there. So if they're being pulled off to other areas, I will, and I'll just let Councillor Russell now, I will be asking questions at crime and disorder of the police. I think that's absolutely right. But for now, what I would say is, we welcome the Trailblazer money. I'd like to make sure it's real money. And I say that as a Labour Party person, that it's not just recycled money, that it's new investment. Because if we get investment in one part, and if we get infrastructure in, that's the benefit to everyone, for jobs, for getting young people in training, getting a better place in Maidstone. That will trickle out. You drop a stone in a pool, it trickles out. So here's hoping we behave a lot better than people in another place, that we haven't got any paintings down in the cellar we want to sell, and I hope that we all can get behind the England women tomorrow.
Spot on time. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd just like to belatedly offer congratulations to your appointment as Mayor, since I was away when you were actually adopted. So
And you missed the Allington Castle Tea
I
Party.
did indeed, I know, which was even more upsetting, to be honest. But following on some of the comments, as leader of the independent group, we have the ability to look at all sides of all the arguments, and each of us individually come down and decide which side of an argument we agree with. Sometimes we agree with all the different parties or individual parties or whatever. And last night, on overview and scrutiny, I agreed with the administration in terms of Maidstone House. I know it's pretty controversial, but at the end of the day, it's a long-term investment. Unfortunately, we won't be here to see the benefit of it, but our successors will. But in terms of property asset management, I'd just like to link it to the other big property Maidstone owns, which everybody knows I'm pretty passionate about, which is our leisure centre, which, whilst it's had some relatively small works done to it, is still only got a limited lifetime. It's pretty well going to outlast Maidstone Council, because it's unlikely to collapse in the next 3 years, but our successor authority will need to replace it. There's no ifs or buts. That building cannot last providing quality leisure facilities for the residents of Maidstone for many more years. And we do need to start to think how we can initiate the planning for its replacement, even if we don't take that element forward. Because if we don't, as residents of Maidstone, nobody else will. Parks, I very much welcome us getting more green parks and so on, but I would ask if we could look into having some form of mobile watering facilities, because picking up on what Clive was saying about all the new planting, I led planting of about 2,000 saplings in Clare Park over the winter, and I was over there a couple of days ago, and with the drought and the lack of water, they're virtually all dead. And almost any new planting now is not going to survive unless we can regularly water it. So we need to look into some form of mobile water bowsers which can actually look into that to ensure that our parks can be greened and we can green the borough. The art strategy is something I've really welcomed. I was the original initiator of moving the council forward with arts back in 2018 when I became chair of the Len Heritage Culture and Leisure Committee. So I'm really happy to see that its first 5-year period under no overall control and Conservatives has been seen through, and now under the current administration we're taking it forward for another 10 years. Arts are the future of our communities. It offers the way to community reconciliation, to address some of the sorts of issues. I know we were talking about miscarriages of justice, that's it. But art gives people the opportunity to understand everybody and to avoid those sorts of things. So hopefully over the next 5 years we can have a really encourage the vibrancy of the borough. The 5-year housing supply, I think, was referred to, something that's out of the control of any of us, but we've just got to work as a council with our planning officers to minimise the impacts of not having that at the moment, which leads me on to my final thing, which will be, again, no great surprise, is the HMO SPD document, which has been through the Planning and Healthier Communities Policy Advisory Committee, which I now chair, which I, with my colleagues on that committee, recommend to the Cabinet to adopt. Want to look at it again in about 6 months, as Clive will know about a couple of the items. One of the things we do need to do is make sure we do actually implement it. Tomorrow, I'm not on planning committee, but tomorrow night there is the first HMO application coming up, and that report, unfortunately, is full of mistakes, and it doesn't particularly reference a policy we are in the process of adopting. If we are going to have a policy around HMOs and areas such as mine and Kimmy's and Fountain Oakwood and yours, Clive, in High Street, we need to actually see those policies being carried through. Otherwise, all the work we've all done here on HMOs could be for now. So I'm really looking forward over the next year to seeing benefits coming through from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. And if you've just seen your latest email today, you'll see the work programme, which includes HMOs almost imminently. I stand to be corrected. Is that true, Cabinet? It is. It's an imminent fixture on their agenda. So, I now open this item to questions from council members for a period of 15 minutes. Questions may be on any subject relevant to the role of the leader. Any hands? Councillor Tribbitt.
Thank you. Again, I hear about the leisure centre, and I just want to reiterate, I would like to see some funds going for sports and leisure into the rural areas, because the rural areas are totally ignored at the moment. Thank you.
Did you want to come back on that, Councillor English?
Yes, I quite agree. One of the reasons why we have not rushed off to simply replicate what is already there is because what is already there may not be the best and only solution. It may be that there are other ways of delivering a leisure offer, a sports offer throughout the borough. Now, I'm not saying that we won't have a leisure centre in Moat Park. In fact, I think it's quite likely, but there are other aspects to this to consider, and we do not want to just rush off and duplicate what's already there because it's already there.
Thank you. Councillor Dawes, I believe you wanted to raise a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to ask about the local government review. I mean, we know that the government is pressuring all local governments to actually create unitary authority, but I'm sorry, but it doesn't sit well in my heart that we haven't had a democratic process on actually agreeing to be part of a unitary authority, and it does feel weird to me that Kent would be split. It's a historical boundary, Kent, and it feels weird for us to be split it apart. So, how are we going to ever vote on this, please?
So, Councillor, do you wish to answer that question, or do you want to listen to another couple that may be on the same subject?
I thought I was very clear earlier on. Before a proposal of any sort is formally submitted on behalf of the Borough Council, a formal motion will have to be put to full council, and that motion will have to be agreed. If it is not agreed, then no proposal can be put, or an alternative proposal can be put if the proposal is amended. We are a cabinet with executive model council. That means that we have operated in accordance with the regulations that the government has set out, and we have responded to the consultations appropriately. However, when we get to the point of having some clarity about what options are going to be able to be brought forward, and a lot of work is being done on this at the moment, that will go to full council for decision. But at the moment, we are not in a position to give you, members of the council, anything that makes sense, because we are still working through the ramifications, the details, the finances and the service parameters. And I'm sure members will want to make an informed decision rather than saying, that sounds good. And I'm sure, Councillor Dawes, that includes you.
Can I just at this stage refer to officers to seek clarity on this issue and any possible timing in that respect?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really grateful because I do think some clarification on this point is needed. 2 points to make in particular. Firstly, any decision from Maidstone Borough Council on this topic, which is, I'll come back to what we're making a decision on in a moment, is to be made by the executive. Arrangements have already been put in place for there to be a full council meeting on the 17th of November for the purposes of seeking the views of council, not to put a motion and not for full council to make the decision. It's for the executive to make the decision.
that is what is set out in the legislation. I'm afraid that is the case.
I was just pointing out the political impossibility of the executive making a decision that was not in line with the...
Okay, I'm just explaining precisely what the arrangements are. So full council will take place, I think you've already been advised, on the 17th of November, and the cabinet meeting will take place on the 19th of November. So that's so far as Maidstone Borough Council is concerned. All the other 13 local authorities in Kent and Medway will have meetings at a similar sort of timetable to allow the submission of a proposition to government by the 28th of November deadline. So this is not a bid. We are not being consulted. We have been asked to submit a proposition. So let's just be crystal clear about what the ask is. So I think a lot of things have been said this evening, and there, I appreciate, remains some degree of confusion, but I can make it absolutely clear this is a proposition that we were invited to put forward by the Secretary of State in his correspondence to us and all the other local authorities in Kent and Medway in February this year. We will, as we go towards full council and the executive decision making, also arrange for all member briefings, as we did up in the lead up to the interim plan being submitted, and we're in the process of finalising those dates at the moment.
Thank you for that clarity. Councillor Springer, did you want to come in on that, or does that answer some of your queries?
It was on a separate matter I wish to ask of the leader.
Fire away then.
Thank you.
Many of you will have seen my emails about the 5-year land supply. I am really, really concerned. The newer members of this council will have no idea what the horrendous implications of having no 5-year land supply are. They are horrendous. The developers rule the roost. I had hoped that Councillor Jeffrey would be here to answer my concerns. I did ask him what actions were being taken to urgently address this issue, and he hadn't answered it. So as we have the Cabinet Member for Planning here, I don't know whether you can answer. I would like to know, are our planning officers contacting all the proposers of the sites in the local plan to ask what their timescale is when they're bringing them forward? Because the answer I got was, well, we're bringing a scoping paper on the review for the local plan in the autumn. That is too late. We know what we have to do. We have to do a call for sites and we start the process. And I'm very sorry, but the leadership is kicking its heels on this. It's taken its eye off the ball, and we absolutely need to address this urgently. So I don't know whether Councillor Harwood or Councillor English, you can tell me, what are you doing to urgently address this lack of a 5-year land supply, a year and a quarter down of your taking over the administration of this council? Thank you.
Councillor English, you are obligated to reply.
I will start, and I may ask Tony to add some words. I'm tempted to say I told you so, because when Tony and I voted against the local plan, one of the reasons we voted against it was because of our concern about the strategy that was being adopted. However, that won't help us in the current situation. So I'm not going to sling nasturtiums around at people. What I am saying is that we are working on what we can do about the 5-year housing land supply. However, I would prefer not to say in public what the detailed response is on what we are going to do, and if we can have a conversation about that, you will understand why. So I'll ask Tony if he wants to add anything.
Thank you. No, I don't think we do have anything further to add on that because of the sensitivity. However, what I would state is beyond the structural issues that we face around the lack of developer confidence, we're just seeing that sites are not coming forward at the speed. I think we have got some challenges from the spatial strategy that we inherited, and you know that. It is not, in the past we had a dispersed approach, lots of fields frankly on the edge of town that developers like to build out 150 houses. We've not got that. We've got big complex sites which were never ever, no matter who was in power, going to come forward easily or quickly, or frankly would deliver the numbers talked about. You know, you talk in your letter about kind of the inner urban areas and so on. You know, that's just not happening in terms of numbers. You know, we looking at the constraints and other sites, it makes it very difficult. We have an approach, but it will be addressed through planning committee, and we have done it before, and we have done it very successfully. And many of us who are sitting around, we've been there before, and the sky did not fall in. We managed it with the policies we have and with national and local policy. So we are working through towards a strategy, but I think we have not had the big challenges yet, and we're ready to face them if they do come, because we do, as you say, have a relatively recently adopted local plan. Thank you.
I know Councillor Springer probably wants to come back, but I've already discussed with officers that I'm going to request a particular briefing on this issue. The officers and members will coordinate in order to do that. I recognise the fact that Councillor English has actually said some things may not be relevant in public, so that briefing would satisfy that, I believe. I trust you find that in order and acceptable. Councillor Springer, did you wish to come back on that?
Just very briefly, I think there were it was about 50-50, I think, between large sites and smaller sites in a town centre. We put forward a lot of sites in a town centre, and they go to planning committee and they get the numbers knocked down. I think I could say the sorting office site, it was in for 217 or something, and it came out, got knocked down to 180 to make a bit more open space. We cannot knock these numbers down. We absolutely have to be going for the numbers, and that is more than 2 or 3 applications. The numbers that were in the plan have been knocked down, so I ask for careful consideration going forward.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I empathise with all of this. This is what a briefing will be for. I don't wish to ask for any further comments on this matter. Officers will grasp the nettle and provide an appropriate briefing. 6 more minutes if anybody wishes to raise any more issues. In which case I close. Sorry, Councillor Wales.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just like to, if I may, respond to Councillor Russell's question on the building of affordable homes and why it's gone quiet. Because we are in the quiet stage of building, because we are waiting for the tenders to come back in and be evaluated for the sorting office site and for Springfield. You only have to drive up the Tunbridge Road to see 2 sites, Corbyn's Place and the Bath Store site, both rising out of the ground and could quite soon be accommodating people. The Heather House project at Parkwood is now virtually finished. Most of the houses have been allocated off plan, and they're larger family homes which we're desperately in need of. At the Cabinet meeting next week, we are looking at moving forward on a rural exception site, which has come through, which you might be able to buy from a developer, and there are other developments coming on. Springfield and the post office sorting site, Maidstone East, together account for about 1/3 of the 1,000 anyway, so even with the reduced numbers. But to address the point about reducing numbers, we're not in the business of building the slums of the future. We want trying to create communities. You only have to see what's being done by Golding Homes in Cambridge Crescent, just behind where I live. They are developing a community and making sure that the infrastructure is there. The Maidstone East site will have shops, will have a doctor's surgery, will have facilities and play areas for the young people to be outside in. And we don't want a space to cram a site full of dwellings, which won't be homes. They will just be units for people to put their heads down at night. We need to create, if we're going to do this, we've got to do it properly and create communities. and that's where we're going with this. But I can supply a more detailed briefing, but that's just what's come straight off the top of my head. Thank you.
I thank you for that. I am going to close the session now because we still have a lot more to get through anyway. I think we've run out of steam on these issues. The answers will be coming. Right. Agenda item 13. I call upon Councillor Nagy to move the recommendation of Cabinet and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, acting as the Crime and Disorder Committee, relating to Maidstone Community Safety Partnership Plan 2025-2028. The recommendation is on page 7.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report introduces the new Community Safety Partnership Plan for Maidstone, written by MDC on behalf of the Safer Maidstone Partnership. The new plan sets out the top priorities for keeping people safe and reducing crime in our borough in 2025 to 2028. This plan has been shaped by local data and feedback from residents and members of the Safer Maidstone Partnership, which includes Kent Police and other key organisations. One important change is the addition of a new priority to tackle violence against women and girls, which residents and councillors have rightly said needs more focus. The plan focuses on 5 main areas. 1, preventing and addressing violence against women and girls. 2, reducing serious violence. 3, reducing the harm of domestic abuse. 4, keeping children and young people safe. And 5, providing a safe town centre. I move that the Council agrees the draft Maidstone Community Safety Partnership 2025 to 28 as contained with Appendix 1 to the report. Thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Nagy. I look to Councillor Russell to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I'm happy to second the motion as we perform our secondary role looking at Crime and Disorder Committee in Maidstone. We've had this and we've all agreed that it's excellent. It's identifies 5 core priorities, as was mentioned by the Cabinet member, and it emphasises collaboration amongst local authorities, law enforcement, community organisations and businesses to create a safer environment for all residents, businesses and visitors in Maidstone. I commend the report to Council. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Councillor Cleto.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I welcome the report, that what's in it, but this needs to be agreed with a proviso. There is stuff coming down the line from the police that we need to keep an eye on. The closure of the Maidstone Custody Centre and their new policy on the most appropriate person could have an impact on our ability to deliver what's in this policy, which is around neighbourhood policing being taken for general duty. So I'm happy to do this policy. I think it's absolutely right, but I think we all need to keep an eye and speak with our local officers when we have our patch meetings and see if there is going to be any impact on our ability to deliver on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cleater. I'm sure Councillor Nagy has taken note of those comments, as indeed Councillor Russell will. Is this recommendation therefore agreed? Agreed. Agenda item 14. I call upon Councillor English to move the recommendation of the Democracy and General Purposes Committee, held on the 25th of June, Community Governance Review, Urban Area, Terms of Reference. Recommendation is on page 110.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wearing a lot of hats this evening. The recommendation, as has been said, is recommendations are on page 110, and I'm happy to move those as report of the committee. The terms of reference attached at Appendix 1 to the report be approved and the Community Governance Review commenced, and consultation options 4 be approved, and the necessary budget provision of £35,000 be provided to conduct the review from the funding pressures reserve, not review. So there's a typo there, and that needs to be amended. It's not review, it's reserve.
I'm looking at Councillor Thompson at the moment to speak if you wish to do so before you leave the room.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor and Council. I knew the difference between my gluteus maximus and my ulna when I came here. It took a while to work out the difference between a CGR and a Regulation 19 consultation, and then to challenge the claims of parish and borough councillors who claimed that they weren't being political, but were less than convincing. The community governance review process is one cyclical procedure to address our least favourite thing in life, change. There's a lot of it about, and it tests our courage. Grove Green used to be very green, while a swathe of land in southwest Thurnham was more of a park than another housing estate. Well, folk got to live somewhere. I came to this council 26 long months ago and stumbled across various councillors looking for more or less subtle ways to turn the 2023 iteration of the Community Governance Review to what seemed to me to be partisan ends. In my campaign for election, I found that local residents in both Weavering and Grove Green were variously uninformed, mystified, or deeply frustrated in their desire to be heard in what should have been a transparent and democratic process, one that enabled all residents in our newer built communities to be heard. Excuses were mustered to avoid asking the residents of Grove Green and Weavering, from the Detling Parish boundary south to Moat Park, whether they felt properly represented and what that future might look like through the lens of community governance. Whether longer serving members here agree with my description or not, a promise was made in 2023 in which this June's Democracy and General Purposes Committee clearly affirmed would be delivered, and I warmly acknowledge my parish colleagues at Thurnham who have embraced this commitment in their question put to full council today. According to our much esteemed Democratic Services officers, I have recently had, as it might be said, greatness thrust upon me in becoming chair of Boxley Parish Council, a claimed level of influence which I think my parish clerk finds it very hard to acknowledge. You may take your pick. It seems I'm obliged to leave you for a vote that may follow. If this grand idea holds any water at all, I hope to invest all my energy and influence, whatever it may be, in synergy with my fellow councillors at Boxley to seek the views of Boxley Grove Green residents on the same generous terms that Thurnham Parish has asked for in stage 2 of the Community Governance Review, seeking their views without fear or favour, openly appraising their support for the various options that they bring to the fore, and enabling the democratic decision-making process, ably assisted by all councillors at parish, ward and committee levels, including by means of engagement with our Democracy and General Purposes Committee, with the best possible motives, above all transparently democratic ones. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Now, Councillor English has moved the recommendation. I'm looking for a seconder to the motion. Councillor Harper was first up. Have you got that? Harper. Did you wish to speak, Councillor Harper?
I'll reserve my right to reply if there's a debate.
Are there further people that wish to debate this issue? I'll look for hands. Yeah, speak now.
All right, very quickly. I think it's a great idea. It's one I've been encouraging us to look at for a number of years. We need to think how we can address, if you like, the democratic deficit for people in Maidstone Town. Having been on this council for 14 years, I'm more than aware that my colleagues who represent parish areas, their residents have always 2 bites of a cherry at an issue. It will go to their parish council to input and then their borough councillors. Whereas us in the urban area, for instance, our residents only have their borough councils. They don't get the extra input which a parish or town council could offer. So I'm really glad that we're now going to go out following tonight to talk to the residents of Maidstone and also those neighbouring areas in Grove Green and Thurnham West about the various types of options they might want to see or may not want to see. We will have to await the outcome of all the consultations. And it's a really great thing to get on with. And I hope everybody, all councillors in the urban area, get involved in discussing this with their residents. Thank you.
I therefore believe that the recommendation is agreed. Is that so? Right, now, ladies and gentlemen, I can see people getting rather restless. We've been sat here for over 2 hours, so I'm going to declare a small respite. So if you would like to take a small break and assemble as soon as possible, please. I'll say no more than 10 minutes. I know, but a lot of people were leaving.
We are at 9 minutes of our break. So you've got 1 minute left.
There may be a few stragglers yet, but one of the reasons why I did that was I didn't mention it in my mayoral announcements. It's the biggest challenge of the last 2 months of my mayoral year so far has been the weather and the fact that I have a bald head and one leg 4 inches shorter than the other. It's been a real struggle for me to actually stand upright half the time. It's been very difficult to carry on wearing a tie and collar and a chain that feels like a rugby scrum on top of me in intense heat. And actually, there was one day when I was actually attending a Royal Naval Association parade where I'd stood in the same place for an hour and a half in the sun, having to go through a lovely service with lovely people. But even I had to ask Ray to take me home that day. And when I got home, I was pretty ill. I don't want other people to be going through this. I can see people getting thirsty. In fact, it wasn't people going on a comfort break for the toilet. It seemed to be people demanding water. I know what that situation is like, because I can tell you, in the heat of a couple of days, I have really needed my water. So I don't want people to dehydrate. I want people to be comfortable. So that's why I had the break. And I will have no hesitation in doing that again. Anyway, let's move on. Back to the agenda. I think we're on item 15. I call upon Councillor English to move the recommendations of the Democracy and General Purposes Committee held on the 25th of June 2025, the outside body report, recommendations on page 129.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This may seem a little bit of housekeeping, but it is actually quite important. The council has been working very hard on extending the area of outstanding natural beauty, as it used to be called, and coming forward with the proposals to safeguard the Green Sand Ridge. It is in line with the importance that we attach to that initiative that we asked the Democracy and General Purposes Committee to switch the remit from this for appointing this position to the Cabinet post, as set out in the recommendation on page 129, to reflect the importance the Council gives to this subject. I move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor English. I'll look for someone to second. Councillor Thompson. The other one. Mike Thompson. Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Keeley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I'm just saying that we didn't actually hear anything Councillor English said, so could he repeat it, please? I think it's where he's got his back to us. Thank you.
I'm sure Councillor English can summarise.
This is it looks like a housekeeping point, and it is. We're Democracy and General Purposes Committee are recommending that the appointment of the representative on the AONB is appointed by the Cabinet, but it's actually quite important because that reflects the work that the Council, supported across party, has been doing to extend the OMB into the Green Sand Ridge area. So having a cabinet representation involved with that process is actually quite important in terms of delivery. We talked a lot about delivery today and making sure policies are implemented. This is part of doing that.
Okay, is the recommendation agreed? Agenda item 16, there is actually no report from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on this occasion. Item 17. I call upon Councillor Forecast to move the motion related to paddle provision.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, members and officers. Essentially, what I wanted this motion to do was ask this council to find a piece of land that could potentially and suitably be used to increase paddle provision, the fastest growing sport in the county town of Kent. It's so transpired that Lockmeadow had been considered privately, and it is my view that this should be a public discussion, as it seems, in my opinion, and I think my group's opinion, the perfect location. And having read this briefing note, I'm even more convinced that Lockmeadow is a suitable location that we should be pursuing. I'm sure the debate will go on, but just working through it. Point 1 about pre-planning advice. Well, it was supportive, and so is the property team. The other point about potential noise concerns. Well, Lockmeadow's home formerly to nightclubs, to leisure, to a cinema. McDonald's is nearby, and so is traffic, so I'm not sure what noise concerns there could be. And if you don't like noise, I suggest you don't live in a town centre. Light pollution, when there's already outward-looking lights, seems strange to me that we would argue on those grounds. And planning, and then it goes on to say about a variety of community events. There's less than half a dozen. This is just not true. And then it talks about applications being considered on their planning merits. Well, this application has not been allowed to for reasons that, as I've just pointed out, don't truly exist. So I would ask full council to refer this to Cabinet, ask them to reconsider and come back to us on their proposals. Thank you very much.
Councillor Callan, I understand you wish to second.
Yes, and reserve my right, that's right, to speak later.
In accordance with Council Procedure Rule 12.9.1, there will now be a debate on the motion, during which the motion may be amended or withdrawn. At the conclusion of the debate, in accordance with Procedure 12.9.3, if there is no proposal to refer the matter directly to Cabinet, I will refer the matter to relevant Policy Advisory Committee, having sought advice from officers. Councillor Cleater wishes to start, I know.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I can see there is a very concerted national campaign going on over paddle. Obviously, this is the Maidstone bit of hip. And I also note that it says about the Lawn Tennis Association, who have fallen out actually with the paddle people at the Lee Valley site up on the old Olympic Village. So I don't think it's quite straightforward. I have absolutely no problem with encouraging more sport in the county town. Let me make that clear. My issue is accessibility. So, sorry about that. Haven't been responded to on Facebook because I asked this question. My understanding is it'll be about £30 odd a court. which is quite pricey if you've got kids, especially when we already provide free tennis at Pennington Heath and Clare Park, etc. So I have absolutely no problem with the motion going and being referred to Cabinet for reconsideration. That's absolutely fine. My issue is the accessibility for people, because the people who need the most help with health, apart from me, are going to be people who are affordability. I think it's absolutely right. We do need to have more leisure facilities, but the Paddle Association or the LTA need to let us know how that's going to link in, whether it's going to be accessible for the local community in terms of funding, and also whether it's going to be bringing people in from outside. In terms of where it is, I know there's an issue in Tunbridge Wells at the moment over noise, so we need to get all that right, but they're all planning issues which need to go to planning and be discussed. But that was my main concern, was around affordability and accessibility.
Councillor English.
I mean, trying to separate my two halves from the Cabinet responsibility to the ward member of the High Street, when I can assure you that the Lock Meadow site, when it had nightclubs adjacent to it, generated roughly one noise complaint every hour in my first 2 years as a councillor. So I can tell you that it's not quite as simple as that. However, in order to move debate and discussion forward, and to make sure that we do emphasise the fact that we are supportive of sports initiatives and would like to see paddle at a site in Maidstone, we are quite happy to accept that this be referred directly to the Cabinet for further discussion.
Councillor Harper.
I support the idea of having paddle provision. I think any sports provision in the borough is to be welcomed. However, Lock Meadow is completely on the wrong site. As a ward councillor, as is Kimmy over there for Fountain Oakwood, this is right in our ward. We have lots of residents along Hart Street where it is located. There's about 1,000 flats along there. And Lock Meadow itself is very close to Kingfisher Meadow, which in itself has 200 flats, which run more or less along the side of the Lock Meadow site. And so any external use of that site bounces straight into those flats. Plus, of course, you've got flats and housing on the other side of the river, which again would reverberate with obviously the Lock Meadow building bouncing the noise. So it will have a big impact on residents. To have a very successful facility, we want it in use a lot of the time. And so we have to really consider where is appropriate for it. I would have thought potentially places like Moat Park. We've got the leisure centre, the bowls club. There's the cricket club there. We've got the various playgrounds and various facilities we've invested there. And if you do it in the centre of Moat Park, you're not exactly that close to residents in terms of this sort of facility, and it's easy of access to the town centre. Watman Park could be another thing, which is as close to the railway station at Maidstone Barracks as Lock Meadow is to Maidstone West. So I support the idea that we look into it, but I can't support this motion, and I'd like to propose an amendment. Okay, so I would propose that after the word "this motion," therefore, we delete those two paragraphs and just replace it by request to the Cabinet to review and consider paddle provision, including, picking up Councillor Cleater's point, affordability, and leave it just as that. So we're asking the Cabinet to look at it. We're not suggesting any particular area, but we're not potentially inflicting it on an area where it would not be appropriate. We're trying to... Earlier this evening we talked about arts and culture. Coronation Square is a prime site for taking that strategy forward. If we turn it into a sports pitch, that finishes our arts and culture strategy if you actually read the action plan. So I propose that amendment. Thank you.
Okay, that is an amendment. Does anybody wish to second that amendment? Councillor Miller.
I'm happy to second that. And just to say, we can say all you like. If you don't like noise in the town centre, you can leave. But we can't tell that to the seal that comes up the river and lives on the banks there. We can't say that to the swans. We can't say that to the people that use the amphitheatre or walk through the gardens around there and listen to the bells ringing.
Is that a seconding of the amendment? Hang on, have we got that? Yeah, please, Councillor Harper, read your amendment.
So it would read, this motion therefore requests the Cabinet to review and consider PADEL provision, including affordability.
Do we wish to debate this amendment? In other words, I am asking first and foremost the next person in that debate, Councillor Dawes.
Yes, I wanted to question the my fellow independents about the fact that it's the wrong locations. Excuse me, but Lockmeadow used to have and still have a big health facility right next door to Lockmeadow, which used to be David Lloyd, that Maidstone Borough Council have purchased. So there is already a health facility. And also, it's a prime location to all bus routes for people to actually go onto.
Can we just discuss the amendment at the moment?
So I'm not quite sure I want to agree with this amendment. I think it's Lockmeadow would be a good location, and actually the cinema creates a lot of decibels, and the residents don't get to actually hear it. So within the inside the building, there's no call on this.
Yes, I've got Councillor Russell as well who wishes to speak on this issue. Please refer to the amendment at this stage.
Thank you. We were really happy with Councillor English's initial proposal just to have a look at it in Cabinet. I think that was the spirit of the motion, and so I don't feel that we needed the amendment. There is a really successful paddle tennis court in Marden. There are properties that are right alongside it in a dark sky area. It's a fantastic facility, but when we had the planning committee application, noise wasn't even considered. So I just think we don't need to get into this. We really welcome Councillor English's idea. It's not a planning application yet, it's just an idea. Happy to for you to look at it in all forms. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nagy wishes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This location for paddle sport, in which we all agree is very busy and will create a lot of business, am I right? It's one of the most successful things, but you're talking about Lockmeadow. There's only one road in, one road out. You could have it there 7 days a week. The main reason this company want it is because of the bus connection, and it's in the town centre. And if we lose Coronation Square, we lose the River Festival, lose all these events in the summer, and residents living across the other side of the river could possibly have this all year round. Floodlights at night, in the winter, it's at least the events happen in the summer. But if we have this paddleboarding on Coronation Square, that just takes the opportunity out, not just for the River Festival, but other people like the Thai Festival. All those things could go because the area's gone. And we're losing places in the town centre where we can do much like this. So I think if we had this paddle company coming in, they want a bus route, which has been said, but the residents living around there could absolutely be crammed in, you know, because it is very popular, which we said, and I think that's the one thing that gets me off it. It cannot be in Lock Meadow. There is other places we can have it where it would be more convenient, but if this goes in, Lock Meadow residents and across the river would not like this council. Thank you.
Councillor English. And then I'll move over to Councillor Forecast for the final say
what is
before we
happening
agree on
now
the
is
amendment.
what I had hoped to avoid, which is having a debate that should take place at Cabinet or at PAC if the council chose to went there, but the Cabinet are the decision makers now, and we'll end up with a very long discussion on the merits of Lock Meadow, and which will then have to be done again at the PAC, at the Cabinet. I share some of the concerns because I represent High Street Ward, but frankly, it would be a lot easier and more productive if we didn't have this debate twice and if we just referred the whole thing as it stands to Cabinet, and then Cabinet can either add things, take things away, make a decision, listen to the representations on all sides. I don't really want us to do it to 10 o'clock tonight and then go back and do it again. So can I ask that the question on the amendment be put?
I will ask Councillor Forecast to round up on that particular thing, but I would like to finish. I would like to have a vote on the amendment as soon as Councillor Forecast has rounded up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't wish to extend the debate necessarily, and Clive, Councillor English, thank you for the gesture of goodwill and being willing to accept things, and I hope that stands. Just on the points of accessibility, Maureen, it is fairly expensive to bring down costs. You know, let's up supply and get it done. Let's bring it here. Also, this will give rent to Maidstone Borough Council, and 10% profits will also be going to the council for them to reinvest in local sport and, you know, refurbish tennis courts wherever. So it's an opportunity here. The noise is an issue for planning committee, but as Claudine said, Marden didn't raise any, Dartford, there hasn't been any raised, and the court will have a roof potentially. In terms of the location, you know, I don't think we need to consider it. I think you've made a good point, Councillor English, and thank you for that offer. And I hope that you'll support this motion as I've written it. Thank you.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to ask for a vote on the amendment. Would you like to repeat it again, Councillor Harper?
Say it again then. So that's request the Cabinet to review and consider paddle provision, including affordability.
Right, I'm going to ask for a vote for the amendment. Against? The amendment is lost. We now go back to the original motion, which is to refer to Cabinet. Are you agreed with this, Councillor Forecast? Who wishes to debate further the motion? No. Go straight to the vote to go to Cabinet. Are we agreed? That's fairly unanimous. Agenda item 18. I call upon Councillor Parfitt to move the motion relating to Fusion Healthy Living Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, officers and members. Fusion Healthy Living Centre is a vital community hub in Parkwood that plays an essential role in supporting some of our most vulnerable residents. Fusion is not just a centre, it's a lifeline for many. It provides youth services, wellbeing support and a safe and welcoming space for those who need it most. And yet, Fusion is currently the only healthy living centre in Kent that receives no financial support from its local council in relation to its premises. It is important to recognise and note other boroughs are doing their part. Dartford Borough Council supports 2 centres, one in Dartford Town and another in Temple Hill. Gravesham supports the Grand financially and their leader is actually a trustee on the board. Sheppey Matters is fully funded by Swale Borough Council and Medway Council funds the Sunshine Centre in full. In contrast, Fusion must cover its own rent, currently £12,000 per annum, to Golding Homes, with no assistance from Maidstone Borough Council. That figure is subject to review and could and probably will increase. Despite this lack of support, Fusion has continued to deliver outstanding services, creating genuine social value. In fact, for every £1 they receive through grants and external funding, they deliver over £27 in value to the community. That's not just impressive, that is exceptional value for money. If we are serious about tackling health inequality, youth isolation and community cohesion, then a more practical long-term involvement from Maidstone Borough Council is not just desirable, it is necessary. Supporting Fusion is not a handout, it's an investment in people, in prevention and in the strength of our community. Within this chamber there will always be debate, and rightly so. Differing views and ideologies are the foundation of a healthy democracy. But I hope this motion will rise above our differing parties. It speaks of something bigger: fairness, responsibility and doing what is right for our community. I urge every one of you to come together and support this motion. And the motion is as follows. This council recognises and gratefully acknowledges the vital role that the Fusion Healthy Living Centre plays in the lives of many of our residents through the wide range of services and support it provides at its hub in Parkwood. Fusion is currently the only healthy living centre in Kent that receives no support from its local council. In recognition of its invaluable contribution to community wellbeing, this council resolves to provide ongoing practical and financial support to Fusion by covering the rental costs currently incurred from its landlord Golding Homes. This amount of £12,000 will be funded, or would be funded if everybody agrees, from the Health Inequalities budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. At this stage, Councillor Cook may wish to say something before I believe he has to leave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Lottie, and thank you, everybody. I am going to have to depart. I'm the longest serving trustee now. Yeah, you may applaud Clive that I'm leaving the meeting. Thank you. But I'm the longest serving trustee of Fusion, going back now 15 years. And it's been an interesting task over that period of time. I remember when I first started attending meetings there, Mike Fitzgerald, who some members will remember, was chair there in those days. And Mike had huge ambitions for what was then the Parkwood Healthy Living Centre. As we moved from one side of Parkwood to where we currently are, which is following the refurbishment and the new building work that was done there, we became Fusion Healthy Living Centre because the trustees and the residents there, we had an ambition to do more, and not just to have the one hub, but the ambition is to have a second hub at some point, and continue to bring that £27 that Lottie referred to. It's a little bit more than that, actually. but £27 in social value for every pound that we receive. I was also taken, Mr. Mayor, by the fact that we were paying a tribute to Derek Butler first thing this morning. When we opened the new premises for Fusion in Parkwood, where we are today, Derek was the mayor, and Derek came and actually opened and officially opened the Fusion as it is today. And it was a delightful time when he came and visited, and as people said, he wasn't just a gentleman, he was a gentleman, and he was a pleasure to do business with. Please support the motion, please support Fusion. It is, the residents there are some of our more needy residents, and Fusion is working very, very hard to try and provide some equality in that. And Lottie, thank you for your motion, and Tom, thank you for seconding it. And Dan, I know, is a recently resigned trustee because of his work commitments, but thank you for everything that you're doing in Parkwood, and particularly for Fusion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If this had been the last item, I would have been delighted.
No, we want you back. I look to Councillor Cannon. I believe you wish to second the motion.
Yes, thank you. I'm delighted to second this motion. Fusion is such a fantastic facility, and I really hope that we can all agree to providing this funding this evening. It's such a small sum for such value for our communities. I first encountered Fusion actually through residents. They told me about it and how important it was to them. And from that, I've always been very supportive of Fusion, and I was delighted when Gary mentioned that this was something that we might be able to do, and so I'm delighted to second it.
Thank you. And in accordance with Council Procedure 1291, there will now be a debate on the motion, during which the motion may be amended or withdrawn. Having seen some interest from the local members, I'm anticipating a debate of some description, but at the conclusion of the debate, in accordance with Procedure 1293, if there is any proposal to refer the matter directly to Cabinet, if there is no proposal to refer the matter directly to the Cabinet, I will refer the matter to the relevant Policy Advisory Committee, having sought advice from officers. I open the floor now. Councillor Cleater.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like Councillor Cook, I remember the old Parkwood Healthy Living Centre, mainly due to the fact it was on my patch. I worked in adult social care. And yes, the Sunshine Centre is supported by Medway Council and always has been as a unitary authority. Now, we could get into, could KCC do more? But we'll be a long time waiting for them to find some more pictures in the cellar to actually fund that. So I'll wholeheartedly support this motion. We probably need more healthy living centres, if the truth be known, in the whole of the borough, but this is a good start. It also empowers people. It empowers people to move on, to actually gain skills, and it is used by health, by social care, by voluntary sector, and those of us who go regularly every year to the pantomime that they hold to fundraise will know that a lot of work goes in outside of that centre to raise funds and connect in with local people, not just in Parkwood actually, they come from all over the local area, including Mangravit, Shetway, Senacre, where we are. So I would ask you to support the motion. It is something that we can do that's good. Yes, I would like KCC to have put a bit of money in, but I'm not a KCC councillor, but I'm sure we would all love to write to the leader of Kent County Councils, whose patch this Healthy Living Centre sits in, to see if she can do anything to support us while we pick up the pieces in this authority. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I'm very pleased to support the motion, and I'd like to thank the proposer and seconder for bringing it forward. As Gary mentioned, I've fairly recently stepped down as a trustee of Fusion Healthy Living Centre, so I saw firsthand how it delivers vital support, not just to Parkwood, but to residents from across Maidstone. So it brings together health services, advice, youth work and social connection all under one roof, makes a real difference to people's lives, often quietly and without fanfare. So it's a model that prevents crisis, builds resilience and saves public money in the long run. And yet, despite that borough-wide value, Fusion stands alone in Kent as the only healthy living centre in the county with no financial support from its district or borough council. Covering Fusion's rent, which is currently charged by Golding Homes, would be a modest commitment for this council, but a major step forward for the organisation. It would let Fusion focus more on delivery and less on survival. In short, Fusion delivers for Maidstone, and I hope tonight Maidstone Borough Council will choose to deliver for Fusion.
Thank you, Dan. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Parfitt and Councillor Cannon, for bringing this motion. Firstly, I wanted to say that I think we should move this motion to Cabinet, but before we do that, I wanted just to say a few more words. Recognising the important role that Fusion play, and actually other parts of the VCSC sector, voluntary community support enterprises across the borough. So I'd just like to recognise that. Maidstone Council does have a well-established relationship with Fusion. I just wanted to cite a couple of things that it's been actively doing as part of the Council's Inclusion Board and also with the Healthy Alliance Partnership. So one, it's been able to support a number of projects and initiatives delivered by Fusion from the Household Support Fund, and most recently in July this year, Fusion were awarded £3,000 for its Lunchbox Friday and Takeaway Boxes project. And even though that seems sort of like quite a specific example, actually supporting initiatives like that for the work that I do in the non-profit sector is really important because it very often enables that extra bit of outreach. So yeah, I think that's important. The second one I just wanted to mention as well is that Fusion have been working with the council on establishing a sustainable long-term solution for food insecurity in Maidstone. And they're the lead community partner in Shepway and Parkwood, supporting delivery of 2 food hubs with a national charity, the Bread and Butter Thing. And I think that's great, but we've got a long way to go to how we address inequalities, whether that's financial or social or health across the borough. So I move that we take this to Cabinet. We've got a budget setting process coming up. We're already starting the preliminary work of that. Looking over the next 2 years, it will be a 2-year budget. But I'd also like to talk to fellow Cabinet members about actually any latitude we have to do anything before then. So thank you.
Councillor Summersgill.
Thank you. It's just a point of clarification. Does the NHS Vanguard system operate within Fusion and within Parkwood, or is that something else that's been looked at? The Vanguard project's been in since 2016 for communities.
I don't think anybody will necessarily know the answer to that.
Mr. Mayor, I do believe that the NHS had previously provided funding support to Fusion. I don't believe it continues to.
We technically have an amendment here.
Well, you need to ask the mover and the seconder
Yeah.
whether they
The proposer and seconder, do you accept the motion going directly to Cabinet?
That's okay then.
Right, fine. We now come to the next and last agenda. Councillor Cook can return, yes. the reappointment of Councillor Peter Cooling as a non-voting parish member, a parish council representative on the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee. I call upon Councillor Field, the Chairman of Audit, Governance and Standards, to move a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, I'm sure I'm not telling any of you anything you don't know, given your diligent viewing of the live webcasts of the Audit Committee, that Councillor Cooling is an extremely valuable member of the committee. He's very knowledgeable, and his contribution is held in very high regard by myself and other members of the committee. So I would like to move that Councillor Peter Cooling of Teesdon Parish Council be reappointed as a non-voting parish council representative on the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee and the hearing panel, as required for a further period of 3 years, with effect from the expiry of his current term of office on 28 September 2025.
Is that seconded? Councillor Green? Yes, that is. I therefore declare the meeting closed. No?